Have you seen that new Foo Fighters video for the song Run?
I have not.
It's them as elderly people playing a show in a nursing home. And I kept thinking how weird it is. I mean, I know time moves on, but that there will come a point that there's going to be people in our generation, your generation, that are going to be in nursing homes blasting Mudhoney and rocking out, you know?
Yeah, maybe if they can still hear.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the only thing they can hear.
Yeah. I mean, even though the band is still active, what is the legacy of Mudhoney?
That's not up for me to say. I have no... that's up to, like, people like you know, people who categorize stuff and put stuff in their places, and I wash my hands of that whole exercise.
Yeah. Well, I guess, what does it mean to you that it's still a living, breathing thing 30 plus years later?
It's surprising in many ways, but also, you know, since it's just been kind of trudging along for all these years, it's not a surprise. It's just kind of the new normal.
Yeah. If you mind me...
I'm thankful that it is, and I'm really stoked that we're all still around and able to do it, you know.
Well, with that said, if you mind me asking, I was wondering how you're dealing with what happened with Chris Cornell.
Well, I mean, at this point, I've come to terms with it, but it was super out of the blue and weird, and I don't really know what to make of it.
Were you guys still in contact?
I never knew Chris that well, but I've been I'm an old friend of Kim's.
Yeah.
Like, we met. We had a couple classes together at the University of Washington in 1983, and the first time we actually met and spoke was at a TSOL show at the Showbox.
Nice. In
1983, and it's like, oh, this, you know, at that point it was like all pretty punk rock, and this guy who used to like come in, show up late in philosophy class with kind of long hair and sort of a scrub mustache, came up to me after the show and was like, "Hey, we got a class together." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that hippie."
And that was Chris?
No, that was
Kim.
Kim, yeah.
Kim.
Yeah. Oh my God, that hippie who shows up late and takes over philosophy class.
What sticks out most for you about Soundgarden and what they were able to do with the Seattle scene?
Well, you know, they were like probably the longest, I mean, except for the fact that they broke up, but I mean, they were one of the first. I mean, they started in 84, I believe.
Yeah, 83, 84 was, yeah.
And I mean, I think the first show I remember seeing them, I think, was probably at the Guerrilla Gardens. And there was a weird earlier version of the band that was actually a cover band that was led by a roommate of Kim's, and like Kim and Hero and Chris played in that, and I saw them one time at, like, you know, a cover band bar.
Yeah.
And, you know, remember seeing, like, you know, they would do a Doors song, and Chris sounded exactly like Jim Morrison. They would do, like, a Zeppelin song. He sounded exactly like Robert Plant. I was like, holy shit. This kid's got something.
Well, what goes... I mean, I don't know if you thought about it much, but, I mean, you've been vocal in the past about your own personal issues with drugs, and I was curious if... I'm not super vocal about it. I mean, I didn't talk about it. Well, I mean, it's
because, I mean, it's kind of a distraction.
Yeah.
At this point, you know, I was, you know, there was like maybe a 5-year period where I dabbled with it, and like 2 of those years were pretty fucking intense and serious. And that's about the length of time I was a Boy Scout.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at this point, you know, I mean, it was so long ago at this point. There's so many years, it's almost like, oh, that's weird. I was an Eagle Scout. Or, that's weird. I was a junkie.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, I didn't know, like, I didn't really want to raise the question, but I was just wondering if, when they say about depression and drug use, if you had ever gotten to that point where you just felt helpless or didn't know what was going on.
No, I had a pretty good idea what was going on. You know, and I wasn't doing it out of like depression or to mask feelings or anything like that. I was doing it because it was fun.
Yeah.
Or it felt good, you know. I mean, that's kind of how, you know, and when I was a kid, they basically taught that, like, you know, like every drug, like this is in the 60s and early 70s, like when you were in elementary school, every drug had the same amount of weight. Like there was no difference between marijuana and heroin and LSD. You know, it just like, you do this stuff, you're going to die.
Yeah.
You know, and that was kind of like how it was sold to you. And like, obviously, like in the 70s, kids in, you know, junior high and younger were smoking weed, and obviously they're not dying.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and then you know, when I got to about college age, I tried some acid, and was like, oh man, this is actually, for a time being, I thought it was kind of enlightening, and you know, it kind of felt like it opened up a whole new way of seeing things. You know? Definitely. And so that was not part of the shit they told you. And then later on, when like other drugs came into the picture, I was like, sure, I'll try it, no matter what. You know, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s where the DARE program, I think, introduced kids to drugs rather than prevented them from drugs, you know?
Right. Well, they probably, like, I mean, it seems like the DARE program was also just, like, there wasn't part of that, like, if your parents smoke pot, turn them in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember they had these, like, little drawings where it'd be like, Sally bought a tab of LSD for $5 and had 6 hours of a great time. It's like, well, how do I get that, you know?
Oh, really?
Well, they would have little things that says, you know, like, to be cool, little sister, whatever, stole beer from the fridge to impress her friends. And I'm like, oh, so that's where the beer is. You know what I mean? Like, things like that. Like, or like, it would tell you, like, how much weed costs. You know, it's like, oh, okay. So that's...
I'll have to save up.
Yeah. But I guess the point of, I guess, I brought up Chris was there's just been so many of these Seattle lead singers that have fallen from that scene, you know, Andy and Lane and Chris and Kurt, and is it just something that had just gone?
Well, I mean, like 3 of those are like basically self-inflicted, drug deaths, and then Chris's is just like this weird, you know, much later, you know, like I kind of figured we were done with this shit.
Well, look what with Scott Weiland a couple years ago too, you know.
Yeah, but you know, he just seemed to be like a lifelong junkie too.
Yeah,
so he was just sort of like a more prolonged version of Lane or something.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it's just me noticing it. Like, why is it that rock and roll seems to go through all these things where you don't really see these kinds of untimely passings with, like, you know, country music or hip hop or something, you know what I mean? But
Tupac?
Well, you know what I'm referring to. Like, there just seems to be these really tragic endings with
I mean, there's really tragic endings in hip hop too, man. I mean, people.
Well, I guess more towards.
I don't know enough about like what goes on in country, but.
Well, I guess like more like
wasn't there like some. Did you ever watch that show, Celebrity Rehab?
Oh, jeez, God, yeah.
Wasn't there like some country woman who, like, I think might have come up through American Idol or something on there?
I can't remember who.
And I think she's dead.
Ugh.
You know, I mean, I don't think, you know, in terms of like drug and alcohol fucking people up, I don't think it's limited to like.
Agreed.
Rock musicians by any means, and most of the people who die out there are not in bands.
Yeah. What do you? I mean, you work with Sub Pop. What are you up to these days?
I'm the warehouse manager.
Okay. So what are you seeing right now with Sub Pop, and the scene itself in Seattle? I mean,
I'm probably the wrong person at this point to like talk to anybody about the scene in Seattle, because I spend every weekend that I have available, I get the fuck out of town and go to the coast and go surfing.
Yeah.
I don't really spend a lot of time in venues watching bands.
What do you think about?
I did go see Wolf People last Tuesday. That was great.
What does surfing do for you, in terms of I guess compared to what music does for you?
I don't know how to really compare the two, but it kind of feels the same thing. Like when I was a kid, I grew up skiing, and then and then later on skateboarding, and kind of stopped skateboarding for a while. Like kind of in the 80s when I got really into music, I kind of stopped skiing and stuff like that because it was expensive. I didn't have any money, and there was like a little brief blast in the early 90s where like I started snowboarding, but then like all of a sudden the ticket prices got too insane. So, I mean, like, there was a while there, like, on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I was in a lucky enough place where I didn't have to have a job. And so we would go, like, on Mondays and Tuesdays, they dropped, like, mid-season, they dropped the ticket price down to $10.
I don't know how they can keep charging that much.
And it was $12 on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Like,
So at that point, it's, it's about the really good places from Seattle are about 2.5 hours away, and that's about the same drive as to the coast. So the surfing kind of fills that.
It's kind of like a zen zone for you, or
I guess, or just sort of like a really fun thing to do that you can obsess over.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I've been a lifelong.
I started getting back, when that Dogtown documentary came out.
Yeah.
I was like, I think 40 at that point when it came out, and I was just flashing on, because that was my, my 70s skateboarding thing. That was like my era, like those guys in particular. And I was like, holy shit. And Steve had been skateboarding, he'd already been like kind of skateboarding, going to parks and stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, there's all these like great parks around that we never had when we were kids, and they're free. They used to have like parks in California, but they all collapsed under the weight of insurance and stuff. But now there's just like these city parks that are just like skate at your own risk. There's no one to sue.
Were you poaching pools in the 70s?
What was that?
Were you poaching pools?
No. There was. I was basically skating like really janky quarter pipes and occasional half pipes. That people built in their backyards.
That no fear mentality of the skateboarders of the 70s, as long as you can keep moving, it doesn't matter, like, the danger involved.
Yeah. There was a skate park in Olympia that had a couple of bowls, and I kind of didn't really know what I was doing because I'd never really skated a bowl before, and dropped into the big one and promptly broke my ankle.
Oh, jeez. Oh.
It's like, this is how you do it, right? Bah!